So today's webinar is Dubsado and Zapier 102, which is mastering the advanced automations. And about a month ago, we had our guest on to do a webinar on the same topic. And it was such a hit with y'all that we knew we had to bring him back and do another offering, another second helping of this information, because you guys really, really seem to enjoy learning about Dubsado and Zapier. And there's just so much to learn and so much to do that you can actually automate with Zapier with your business and streamline things. So our guest today is Todd Harper. He's a Dubsado certified specialist as well as a certified Zapier expert. And I couldn't think of a better person to come on and talk about how to streamline your business with Zapier and as well as Dubsado. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what else he can teach us today. He's going to be doing some live demos and answering our questions. It's going to be fantastic. So let me go ahead and bring on Todd Harper to the stage. Oh, still muted.
All right. Can y'all hear me?
Sorry, Todd, that was on me. Go ahead again.
Oh, can you hear me? Are we here?
I'm still not here, Todd, unfortunately.
Uh-oh.
Let's give it one sec.
One sec.
Let's see. Mute and unmute him.
Hello, hello. Testing 1, 2. Oh, you can hear me.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you all. I'm excited to be here for round 2. I have to apologize in advance for the last month or so. I've been having a basement renovation, and today, for whatever reason, happens to be the noisiest day of the entire renovation. And so if you hear some jackhammering or anything like that, just ignore it. I've turned on a lot of filters to try to focus on isolate my voice, but that's what that is if you hear any weird sounds. All right, so I would love to see in the chat just for who this is the first time, if you were here for Dubsado plus Zapier 101, or if you're brand new. And if you're here, if you're returning, I'd love to know if you've implemented any automations in your business since the last session. And it'd be great to kind of see what cool things you've done. First time for a couple of you, awesome. I do recommend, if this is your first time, go back and watch the first one too. You're gonna be fine and understand what's going on in this one without having seen the last one, but we'll be adding a whole lot of context if you also see the first one. Awesome. It looks like a lot of you are brand new, so that's exciting. Awesome. I'm going to share my screen, and first I'm just going to go over a quick PowerPoint, and then we'll dive into some live demos. So here we go, share screen. There we go. All right, so Trevor already said I'm Todd Harper with Business Tech BFF, and this is Dubsado plus Zapier 102, Mastering Advanced Automations. He already talked about my certifications, so I'll just skip right on past that. But here, let me get into, why can't I click through my presentation? Sorry, technical difficulties here. Okay, I'm just gonna click on the screen. Oh, now my presenter notes don't show up. Okay, so first, last time we sort of just dove into some demos without really establishing a baseline of what is automation? Why should you automate things? We talked about how you automate things, but we didn't really get into the what or why. So I'd like to cover that a little bit at the start of today. First off, what is automation? Automation is taking tasks that are, and here I like to demo this by holding up my little clicker here and saying we take tasks that are routine, repetitive, time-consuming, error-prone. I accidentally tapped twice on that last one, so that was an error, and sometimes difficult for a human. And instead making those things happen automatically, or as I like to say, automagically. So here is an example of automation. Watch the screen, watch my hands. Ooh, you've probably all done this with PowerPoint. That means you've automated in the past. If you've ever done PowerPoint automations or animations, those are a form of automation. And so that is essentially what automation is, taking these routine tasks that you're doing all the time and just making them happen on their own. So I often get asked the question, what should I automate? I have dozens of consultations with clients or potential clients who come to me saying, tell me what I should automate. And I'm like, well, I don't know what you should automate because I don't know your business and I don't see what you're doing in your office every day. Because the things that you should automate are anything you find yourself doing over and over and over again. And that can be on a per client basis, a per week basis, per month, per year, whatever. The things that you're doing over and over all the time. And that can be you, that can be a staff member, that can be a VA. If they're doing the same thing and it's a simple task that meets one of those criteria of being routine, error prone, sometimes difficult for a human that maybe a computer can do a little more consistently and better, those are things that you should automate. And so I would challenge you over the course of this session to think of 5 tasks that you're doing, or you or your staff are doing over and over and over again and can automate instead. I would also invite you to post some of your thoughts, some of your ideas for what these tasks are that you're going to automate into the chat. To have a little bit of accountability from our community to say, hey, did you actually go and automate that? And 2, I'm actually at the end of this session, I'm going to build one live. I'm going to choose one from the chat and build it in Zapier live before your eyes. So one of you will get one of your automations built for you. And hopefully I'll be able to send it to you as well, so you can just start using it. Okay, so that is it for my PowerPoint. Let's go ahead and hop into a live demo. I get a little audio issue when I'm switching between sharing screens, so bear with me for a moment as I switch. Okay, here we go. Share screen again and share screen of this one. All right. So if you were here the last time, one of the things that I did with you was I went through, I seem to have left my webinar examples folder here. Last time we went over these 4 Zaps that I had sort of pre-built for this webinar. Today, I'm starting from scratch so that you can watch Zaps being built live in real time. I hope that this will help you all figure out, like, get over the blank page syndrome where some people just come into Zapier and they're like, oh no, Todd told me all these great tips, but I have no idea what to do because I can't get started. So we're going to get started together, and we'll just build through a few things as we go. Are there any questions to get started before I really dive into this? Okay, I see. Perfect. I think we're probably good to get going. I don't see any major questions right away. But the first thing I want to show you, last time we talked about Zaps or apps that exist in Zapier already. And so today I'm going to show you a lot of what you can do with apps that don't exist in Zapier, or apps that don't necessarily do what you need them to do, and how we can force them to do what you need them to do. And so one of the ways that we can force things to do what we need them to do the best is by using some of Zapier's built-in tools that are apps that they've created for their platform. So I'm going to go ahead and click on New Zap right over here. And we're starting fresh with a new Zap. And here as a trigger, I just want to show you when you click on one of these actions here, you're going to see this window. And over on the right side, there's popular built-in tools. These are some of Zapier's most popular tools. But if you also go search for the 7,000 plus apps and tools up here and say, buy Zapier, you can see a full list of all of Zapier's built-in tools. There's a lot of them. I'm not going over all of them today, and the ones I am going over, I'm not going over in complete detail. I do encourage you all to come in and see what's possible with these. You can see some of them are grayed out, and that just means that they aren't triggers, they're actions, so we'd have to utilize them in an action step. As a use case, I get a lot of clients who say they want to email all of their current clients or all of their current leads every Monday morning just to follow up and say, it could be any number of things like, hey, here's your weekly check-in. Do you have any questions for me? Maybe it's just to follow up to new leads to say, and maybe supplementing your Dubsado workflow, where if somebody hasn't moved from one project status to another, you can just consistently on a weekly basis follow up with people until they book or tell you to stop contacting them. And so one way we can do this is using Schedule by Zapier. And if we click into this, there are several different types of schedules. We can do a daily schedule, an hourly schedule, monthly or weekly. We can also set up some custom frequency. This is a little bit more advanced, but works similarly. You can see you can set it up by days, weeks, and months. But here, I'm just going to say every week. And maybe we're going to say every week. If we say day of the week on Monday, they make this really easy for you. You click on Monday. You can say time of day. You can also choose multiple days throughout the week. So if you wanted every Monday and Thursday, you could do that as well, all within one Zap. For time of day, I'm going to choose 8:15 a.m. There we go. And I can say continue. And there we go. The trigger is all set up. I don't need to connect it to an external app because it's a native Zapier app. It's built right into their platform. So there we go. We can see that it triggered, and it gives us all this information about the date that it triggered. We're not actually going to use any of that, but you could if you ever wanted to pull some data into a following step. Okay, so here we have our every week trigger, and actually you can change the name if you want to make it more specific. So I'm going to say every week on Monday at 8:15 a.m. Okay, and then let's look at some of the other tools available by Zapier. One of the things that I think is pretty nifty, we talked a lot about SMS in our previous webinar, where we talked about how you can text your clients. One great way to text yourself, if you want reminders, is to use SMS by Zapier. This is a free alternative where a lot of the other platforms you're paying per text message. SMS by Zapier is completely free, but you have to text pre-approved numbers. You can't use this for external communications. It has to be something that you have verified yourself. So, it's good for personal notifications to yourself. So maybe every week on Monday at 8:15 a.m., I just want to send myself a little, I'm going to choose my work number here. And we'll say it's from, you can choose a static number that it comes from each week, or you can say I want it to come from a random number. Generally, I like choosing a static number, and then I'll save that number in my phone, because then I know I can name it like Monday morning texts or something. So every time it comes through, I know this number ending in 4622 is my Monday morning texts. So you can just say like, hi, Todd. Happy Monday. Let's have a great week. I don't know. This isn't really a great use case. I wouldn't send myself a weekly text randomly, but maybe you want to create an encouraging message, or you could have an AI step in between that writes some kind of positive quote, and you get that every Monday. Whatever you want. Not really a wonderful business use case, but fun personal motivation. You can use this for a lot of other things too, this SMS by Zapier. If you want to be notified by text every time a particular thing happens in one of your other applications, whether that's Dubsado or anything else. So if the application you're using doesn't have SMS or push notification reminders, you can set up your own. So there we go. That's SMS by Zapier. If I were to continue and say test this step, we'll see that I should get a text message. Let me bring that over here and say open. Okay. Yeah, so then we got this text from this number ending in 4622, and it says, "Hi Todd, happy Monday. Let's have a great week." So there we go. It just sent me a text. Okay, some other tools to look at here in natively supported by Zapier. The delay. Delay is a big one, and one I use frequently in most of my workflows. There are several options here. There's delay after queue. So if you were to have something that triggers back to back, like 10 times in a row, and you want your Zaps to wait until one thing has been handled before moving on to the next, you can put things in a queue, and this will delay the following steps of your Zap until that thing has had a chance to be active in another Zap. This one is kind of complicated, but is really good for some things. Actually, there was another Dubsado certified specialist I was helping a few weeks ago who this ended up being a good solution for something she was having an issue with, where everything was firing all at once and it was sending the wrong data because it was all pulling from the same place. And it was, anyway. If you need to handle things one at a time, delay after queue is a good way to do that. Delay for just says, hey, delay this for a month, delay this for a week, and then delay until gives you a specific date or time that you choose. So I'm going to say delay for, and we'll say we just want to delay for 15 minutes. And so we would come in here and say 15 minutes, continue. And now when this triggers every Monday at 8:15 a.m., this is actually going to wait until 8:30 a.m. To perform the next actions. We can say test step, it's not actually doing anything, but it does tell us what 15 minutes from now is. Okay, I'm going to choose, in this case, this is not a built-in Zapier tool, but just as an example, I'm going to pull something from Airtable, where I'm going to find many records. You can see with line item support, this is really important for the thing we're going to do next, which is called looping by Zapier. And anytime you have a list with line item support, you can loop through each of the results that it returns to do a particular action. So, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. So if I were to come to account, I'm just going to choose this one, my testing account. We're going to go and say the base I'm looking for is it's webinar examples, and the table is projects, search by field. And by the way, Trevor, I don't have the chat or Q&A pulled up. If there's anything that anybody is like hardcore, please stop, let me know. You were good about that last time, so I'm not worried. Okay, so here, if we have find many records, I'm just going to search for search by field, and I want to look for anyone who has a status of new lead. And if I go to my Airtable project here, we can see that I have 4 records that all have the status new lead. And so it should pull in those 4 records if I say continue. Oh, I should say that down here it says max records. At most, this is now going to pull in 10. You can set this to up to 100. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say set it to the max. And we'll say continue, test step. There we go. It's returned all 4 of these records and a bunch of information about them. So if I were to go then and add an additional step and say I want looping by Zapier, we could come in and say create loop from line items. You can also do create loop from numbers, and that just means if you wanted to do something 20 times, you could type in the number 20. And create loop from text is actually something I've never used, but I can't tell you exactly what it does. I'd have to investigate a little further. But most often I'm using looping by Zapier for looping through line items. So let's say continue. And it says values to loop. So you're going to give this a name. I'm going to call this email address. And I put a little underscore in between these. That's just a habit of my, I'm a web programmer, so I type a lot of code. You don't have to do that. You could type email address and that's fine. But then what we're going to do is go look up in Airtable here, and we're going to look for the list of email addresses. So we can see that right here, I have partner A email addresses from this. I'm going to go ahead and add that in. And then I'm going to add another field, and I'm going to call these first names or first name. And we can choose. Oh, actually, I'm not going to say first name. I'm going to say project name, because you can see in this particular Airtable database, I have listed basically the project name is the couple's name or an individual. If you weren't here for the previous webinar where I set this up, we were pretending to be a wedding planning business. And so these are couples from that wedding planning business. Okay, now we'll go back here and I'll say project name right there. We're going to choose the project name, which is this one, the event name. And I'm just going to say continue, and we're going to say test. All right, and so what it's pulled up is it's shown us the email address is test@businesstechbff.com, and the project name is Todd Harper. So it's pulling from this one here where the email address is test, the project name is Todd Harper. And these, it's showing us that this is the first iteration of the loop. And to wrap your head around this, looping is going to take each of those things that came from Airtable, and it's going to treat them as one item, and it's going to do the same things over and over to each of them. And so right here, it's showing us the preview loop values. This is just for you to understand when you're setting up the Zap, what it's pulling information about. So the first one is test at Business Tech BFF. The second one is Todd at Business Tech BFF. Then Han for this Leia Skywalker and Han Solo wedding. And then hello. So we've got these 4 different values. But it's really important when you're using looping by Zapier that you don't link any of the preview loop values in your following steps, because they won't actually exist when you turn on this app. You just want to pull these 2 that you that have one value associated with them. So then the next thing I'm going to do is within this loop, I'm just going to create an email. And so here I'm going to go to email by Zapier. You can use, if you use Outlook or Gmail, things like that, you absolutely can integrate with those applications and send emails that way. But since I'm showcasing some of the pre-built applications by Zapier, we'll choose email by Zapier here. And we can send an outbound email, continue. And I'm going to say I want to send it to, again, we don't want to use the preview loop values. We want to use the actual email address that's coming through. And for subject, I'm just going to say Monday morning check-in. And for body, the body of the email, you could say, hi, couple's name. So hi, project name. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing there. Hi, project name. This is your weekly check-in. How's it going, Todd? real simple email there. You could, of course, make that more complicated. You can add an attachment. You can say who it's from. So I'm going to call this Zapier bot. We'll say reply to, and we can leave that blank actually. And I'm going to say continue and test. And let me go open my email real quick. Okay, and then you can see I just got this email a couple moments ago that's from Zapier bot, and it says, hi, Todd Harper. This is your weekly check-in. How's it going? So, and then it gives them an option to unsubscribe if they want to, because that's important. So, yeah, that is looping by Zapier.
Well, we have a second here, Todd. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think you're about to ask for questions. Yeah,
I was just going to say, are there any questions? Yeah.
Perfect timing. I was just going to jump in since we're right on the topic. Emily was asking if emails can be sent from an email address that is not the main Zapier account email when you're sending that email there. Can you choose a different from email address?
Not for the, well, actually, sorry. From name. Okay, so not for Zapier, email by Zapier, but if you're using like the Outlook or Gmail app, you can set those to be other email addresses.
Perfect. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so I also, I was going to touch on some other inbuilt or built-in Zapier tools, but I'm going to skip them for today. One, because they're a little complicated, and two, because it would use most of the rest of our time. And I have a lot of other things I want to show you. But I encourage you to check out both Storage by Zapier, this here, and Digest by Zapier. These are both really powerful tools that help retain information from one Zap run to the next. So rather than just having a trigger and then having everything happen and then being done with it, both Digest and Storage help keep persistent data in your Zapier account that you can use for later Zap runs. One use case that I find really useful for Digest in particular is every Monday morning, I get a report of all of the payments that were made the previous week. And that happens with Digest. So every time a payment comes in, I record it in my Digest. And then every Monday morning, just like the schedule by Zapier here every Monday morning, I have that digest released to my email, and I get an email outlining every payment I got the previous week. So Digest is a really cool tool for that. Storage works a little bit like a database. I wouldn't use it as a replacement for a tool like Airtable, but it can be helpful for just if you need to access a person's information from one Zap run to the next, it can be helpful for that. I don't have time to go into that in detail, but it is a cool tool. It's worth checking out. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about, so we've talked about apps that do exist in Zapier, and we've talked about apps that are created by Zapier. Now we're going to talk about apps and actions that don't exist in Zapier and how you can still use them. This gets a little bit technical, but I'm trying to keep it as high level as possible so that you're not kind of just scratching your head and saying, what are you doing? So do let me know if there's anything that I need to re-explain or explain a different way. I'm not, I can get a little nerdy and technical. Don't feel bad about stopping me. Okay, I'm just gonna go and I'm going to, first I'm gonna rename this, we'll call it 05 apps by Zapier. We're gonna go back to webinar examples here, and we're gonna create a new Zap. So this can be, I'm using an app called Todoist for my examples here today. But this could be for, if you don't use Todoist and you use something else or any app that exists on the internet, you can follow these sort of same principles that I'm talking about today. So let's go ahead and look up Todoist. As a trigger application, you can see that there are three different triggers for Todoist. There's new completed task, new incomplete task, and new project. And by the way, it's probably obvious from the name, but if you haven't used Todoist before, it's a to-do list app and slight kind of low or lightweight project management app. So if you've used Things, it's similar to that, or if you use ClickUp or Asana, or other project or task management apps, it's similar to those. This is the one I use. I really like it. But the point here being, I would like to trigger a Zap anytime someone comments on a task. But unfortunately, Zapier doesn't have a trigger for when someone comments on a task. And so if I didn't know better, I would just give up here and say, well, there's probably no way to do it because it just doesn't send that information. That is sometimes the case, but you should never come into Zapier and assume that something can't be done just because it's not listed here. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Google and search for Todoist, and we're going to say type in API documentation. And now API documentation is created for developers. It's created for people who write code. And so I don't want you to see this and get scared and be like, oh my gosh, there's all this code happening. We're not going to get intense with code. What we're going to be doing is actually really simple. And as long as something has what's called a REST API, and so you can see that's here in purple at the top. If something has a REST API, it can be brought in to Zapier regardless of whether a pre-existing action or trigger exists. And so let's go ahead and click into Todoist's REST API. And specifically what we're going to be doing here, and I'm going to keep this tab open because we're going to come back to it in a little bit. It's helpful to read over some of this. You won't understand everything, and that's fine. But especially most API documentations have something called Getting Started. And this is going to be helpful for you to know, hey, what can I do to get started? Often you're going to see some code over on the right side, and that can look scary. I'm going to demystify this for you in a few minutes so that you'll understand exactly what this means. And it's actually very simple. Okay, so know that this exists. I'm going to actually go into Todoist to show you something here. And let me make sure that's on my screen. Yes. Okay. I'm going to go into my settings in Todoist. And I'm going to click on integrations. And this might be located in slightly different places for every application that you use. But generally speaking, there's going to be an integrations or apps or something that specifies, you're bringing this into another platform. And then I'm going to click on developer. Again, don't be scared. A lot of applications are going to have what's called an API token. It could be called an API key, a personal access token. There's lots of names for it. But it's a private key. I'm not going to click the unhide here because then you'll have access to mine. But it's a private key that you need to work with most REST APIs. So if we were to go into the documentation here, you'll see there's a tab for authorization. And it's just going to tell you that, hey, before you can do something, you need to type in authorization, the word bearer, and then your token. And so you get your token from the application. You want to treat this very much like a private, like a password. If somebody has access to it, they have access to your entire account for whatever application you're using via the API. So, they could go in and delete things, they could go add things, switch the order of things, really get confusing. So you never want to share that. Treat it like it's a password. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is here, if I go to, I'm in the REST API, I'm going to go to projects. Actually, we'll do that when we get into actions. I'm going to search for webhooks. Oh, webhooks doesn't show in here. It's because it's in the sync API. We're not going to deal with the sync API. That's extra advanced. But one thing we can do is if I go to Todoist and just search for Todoist webhooks, and what I'm getting at here is instead of using the Todoist trigger app, we're going to use webhooks by Zapier. And so, so we're going to use this thing called a webhook, and that's just going to receive information from somewhere on the internet, and it's going to do something with it. So I'm going to do what's called a catch hook. We can say continue. We're going to leave pick off a child key empty. You don't need to worry about that. And then it gives me this URL. And this is what I'm going to give this URL to Todoist to say, hey, anytime something happens, let this URL know. So if I go back to Todoist webhooks, and forgive me here, I'm just trying to remember in Todoist exactly where these are located. Okay, here we go. So back in that documentation, we were on the REST API. We're going to go to Manage App. And again, this is slightly different in every application. So you're going to have to dig into it and figure out where this is. And you could create a new app. I'm going to use this one I've already created called Business Tech BFF Internal. And you can see that I've got a lot of details here. Actually, let's go ahead and create a new app for this. We'll just call it webinar example. I don't want to mess up any of my live things. We can leave the URL here. I'm going to say create app. And down here, you can see that there are watched events for webhooks. And there are lots of things we can do. I'm going to listen for every time a note is added. That's right here. And a note in Todoist is a comment. And so I'm just going to say save that. And we can say that we're done here. That should be all we need to do. Good. Sorry. We need to give it that URL that I was just talking about from Zapier. I was like, why isn't it letting me save? It's because I need to put that in. Now we can say activate webhook. So now I'm going to go comment on a task. Oh, that is here. Nope, it's not. Where did I put that app? It's on my other screen. Okay, so I'm just going to go comment on here. I have this webhook triggers. I'm going to say, hey, this is a comment. And comment. There we go. Now, when I go back to Zapier and I say test this trigger, it hasn't done it. Well, that's pretty odd. No added to my project. Should be all we need to do. I'm going to say save settings. We'll go back to home. Another comment. Okay, if it doesn't work this time, I'm going to jump ship because we're going to want to see more. Okay, yeah, I don't know why Zapier isn't picking it up this time, but you should see a comment there. And so this is just one example of, hundreds of apps you can do this with. Many apps, just search Google for your app name plus API documentation or webhooks. And you should be able to figure out how to add a webhook to your app to listen for trigger events that don't exist natively in Zapier. Okay, now let's talk about what you can do when you want to perform an action in an app that doesn't exist in Zapier. So here I'm going to say Todoist again. And there are lots of things you can do, like adding a comment to a project, adding comment to a task, plenty of options here, and including create task. And I would like to create a task, but let's say I come in here and I'm wanting this to be a subtask of a task that already exists. But I'm not seeing here where I can make this a subtask. It only shows me the option to make a regular task. But I would like this to become a subtask of this webhook actions task here. In order to do this, we can use a webhook in reverse. So rather than a webhook being sent to Zapier from Todoist, we can do it instead of going from Todoist to Zapier, we'll go from Zapier to Todoist. And so I've written down here that the task ID for this particular task is this, so I have that there. Depending on what apps you're using, you don't necessarily need to know something like this. If you do need to know something like this, you can get it from when you created the thing. So when I created webhook actions, the task ID was produced, so you can get it at that point. There are other ways to get it as well. That gets pretty technical. I'm not going to go into that in the scope of this webinar. Okay, so let's go ahead and instead of a Todoist action here, we're going to use a webhook. And now there are these several options. Get means literally get some information. Post means put information into the app. And put means usually means update something in the app. In this case, I'm going to use a post request. If you're ever unsure what you should be using, this is where the REST API documentation comes in handy. So I'm going to go look at projects or tasks actually, and I'm going to say create a new task. And this tells you all the information you need to know about creating a new task, including the first thing is usually you're going to see next to the word curl a URL in quotations. If you copy paste this URL over into Zapier, I didn't actually look at the thing I was coming here to look at. You can see in big letters it says post. So that means this is a post request. So that tells us we're going to use post here. For the URL, I'm going to paste in that URL that we just saw. For payload type, generally speaking, you can use form. If you need to use something else, that can get a little technically complicated. So generally try to stick to form. And all you need to do is in the data, I'm actually going to put these side by side. We're going to add whatever this is telling us we need to add. So for tasks, I'm going to say create a new task. Required parameters are content, and that's it. And so this is the title of the task. I'm going to call this, I'm going to say content in this box in data. And then it says enter text. So I'm just going to say I'm a new subtask. I'm going to add plus. And it's going to say, oh, I can add a description. So I'm going to go ahead and add a description. And we'll say, this is a subtask created by a Zapier webhook. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to put here is the parent ID. So if we scroll down to right here, we can see that it asks for parent ID. So this is now letting us choose a parent for this subtask. And so the parent is going to be the ID that I created here. Webhook actions. We'll copy paste that in. And so we want parent ID. Earlier, I explained that I type in underscores like this because I'm used to coding, and you can do it any way you want. In this case, you need to do it exactly as it's written in the documentation. So in this case, it's parent underscore ID, all lowercase. And then I'm just going to type in that ID here. And then you can see that there are, this is kind of small, let me zoom in. You can see that there are these things with an H next to them. This means headers. And so in Zapier's webhook area, we can see a section for headers. And I'm going to type in content type. You can see it's exactly written like it is here, and it's application JSON. And for X request ID, I'm going to leave that blank for now because we're going to talk about what that is. And then for authorization, you're going to type in the word bearer and then your API token. Again, this is a private thing. I don't want you showing it to anyone, and I'm not going to show you mine. So I'm going to, in a moment, I'm going to drag this off screen, put in my my actual API token, and then press test, and we'll see what happens. Okay, for this X request ID, this is something that Todoist asks for that most apps don't. So you usually don't need to worry about this. But in this case, it's asking for a UUID. And this is just, and you can see UUID gen. This is a random string of letters and numbers that helps sometimes keep information secure as it goes over the internet. And if you ever encounter something requiring a UUID gen, you can just go search in Google for UUID generator. I use one called uuidgenerator.net. And here, as soon as it loads, if it loads, there it goes. It generates one for you right here. We're just going to copy it in and paste. There we go. Okay, like I said, after bear, I'm just going to type in my API key here, and you, generally speaking, well, you'll have your own, and it'll be different than mine. So I'm going to pull my screen over here, and there, I type it in, and let's see what happens as soon as I press test on this. Here, we'll bring this to this side of the screen. We'll bring this over to this side of the screen, and I'm going to say test. There we go. It says I'm a new subtask. This is a subtask created by a Zapier webhook, and so. Now this webhook has sent information to this and is now a subtask of the webhook actions task. So this is a really simple, okay, it's not simple, but this is a really powerful way to master Zapier and go far beyond what's already available in its pretty vast existing capabilities. So webhooks, really useful. I'm not going to have time to go over. You can see I got a little ambitious with my list of items here, but I do want you to know that in addition to webhooks, there are two other ways to create this information or send it to your apps from Zapier. And the first is some Zapier apps do have built into them, if we look at Todoist, this thing called API request. And this is really neat because you can see it's in beta. It's a brand new feature to Zapier. This allows you, if your apps have these, this allows you to do everything we just did with a webhook, except your authorization is already in, so you don't need to worry about typing in your API key because you're already logged into the app, so it doesn't require that information from you. So there we go. you just have to type in post and then URL, and then those pieces of information it asks for. And then the other way is to do with code. I'm not going to go into that, but if you ever have like really complicated API requests that you want to do, talk to a web developer and say, hey, can we write some code that can do all of these different things? It can be a lot more efficient. For example, here, I'll just kind of show you. I'm going to copy something over, copy, and paste below, paste step. Oops, that's not what? Open phone. Sorry, hold on. Copy and edit, paste below. Okay, it's not copying over. But one thing you can do with code is to, similar to what we did with looping by Zapier, we can iterate over a list of items and do a bunch of things repetitively, but we can do it all from within one step, rather than having to, sorry. If you were at the last webinar, I explained that Zapier charges per task that you use, or per action. And so if you're using looping by Zapier and you use 50 loops, 50 actions, that counts as 50 actions against your account. If you do it all in one single code step, it only counts as one step. So code can be a lot more efficient if you are working with a developer to set it up for you. So here, I'll show you in my Zapier, just look at the HTTP requests by code task here, and I'm going to run another piece of code that I wrote. And we can see, instead of just one task, it's creating 5. There it goes. It's creating 5 all at once. And it's doing that all with using one Zapier action. So it can be a lot more efficient. All right. Any questions about that? I know that got pretty technical, and happy to rephrase anything that you need.
There was one more question, actually, referring back to the looping with Zapier.
Yep.
A while ago, I just missed it right when we were chatting about it. But Michelle was asking if everyone in the loop is getting that same email. So you're typing up like, "Hey, this is your weekly check-in," or that email at the top there. In that loop, everyone would be getting the same email, correct?
Everyone would be getting the same email with their own customized, in that case, their own customized project name in the hi so-and-so field.
Perfect.
And you can customize them as much as you want. So if you had information, depending on, I was pulling from Airtable and going into an email. If you're using Airtable to pull information, you could have, any number of fields that you want to pull information from. So maybe you're tracking like outstanding balances, and you want to say, in that email, hi, so-and-so, this is a reminder that you have an outstanding balance of X amount. And that'll be customized to each person with the same language around those dynamic fields.
Cool. Yeah, that would operate very similarly to like smart fields in Dubsado, obviously.
Yeah, the custom mapped fields for sure. Okay.
I know we're a little bit up. We're at 55 minutes here. I'm not sure how long some of these example Zaps would take, but if you wanted to take a moment to peruse in the presenter area there on the right-hand side of your screen, Todd, I did kind of pull out some of the automation.
Oh, perfect.
ideas. I think a lot of these probably are going to be a little bit longer than we have time for, but if you happen to keep your eye,
sure.
those might be quicker too. Quick to set up, and let me know. You would know obviously much better than I.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Someone did setting up a folder on a Google Drive for a ticket buyer and emailing the buyer with a link to that folder. That one we can do really quick. But it's sort of also similar to something I did in the last webinar. So if you want to review that, that can be good. exporting Dubsado projects invoice total to corresponding toggle projects. Oh, that one's going to take a little longer. Renaming and sending a Google spreadsheet for every customer with an addressing project in Dubsado. Getting a weekly digest email of all Stripe payments, including fees. Yeah, the weekly digest email with Stripe payments, including fees. That's one I just explained, but didn't showcase. Let's go ahead and just do this because it's probably the quickest in this list. Setting up a Google Drive for a ticket buyer and emailing the buyer with a link to that folder. So one thing we can do is, I don't know where your ticket buyers are coming from, if they're like from Dubsado or from another application, but I'm just gonna do as my trigger event here, a code step. Don't worry, I'm just gonna try to replicate some information about a person. So here I'm gonna say, let email equal Todd at businesstechbff.com. And we're just going to leave it as that. And we'll say output. You don't need to know anything, understand anything I'm doing right now, just so you know. Okay, and we're going to say person is person. And email, continue, test. Okay, good. So we're just imagining that whatever trigger app we had sent us this information about the person's name and their email address. Then what we can do is come over, and I'm going to change this to a Google Drive step. We're going to say create a folder, continue, choose. I'm going to choose this account, continue. I'm not going to give it a parent folder, but you could embed it within an existing folder. Or maybe I'll put it in webinar examples because that's where we're at. And then for folder name, you can call it whatever you want. It could be like client folder Todd Harper. And this is dynamic, so that would change per person. And we can say continue and test step. Perfect. And here it's generated a new folder. If I went into Google Drive, we would find it there. I'm not going to do that, but we can see if we go to link, self-link, this here is the link to that particular folder. Oh, no, it's not. What? Should be. Oh, sorry, it's the alternate link here, not the self-link for Google Drive. So if we click on that, oh, it's still not going. The request is missing a valid, oh, it's from Google APIs. That doesn't make sense. This, I guess I didn't actually copy paste it. I'm pressing Command C 50 times. There we go, drive.google. There it is. So now we're in client folder Todd Harper that got created within webinar examples. And so we've done that. And from there, it's really simple just to say, hey, send an email. I'll do from the Gmail app. And we'll say send email, continue, continue. We're going to send it to, and we're pulling the email address from our trigger. For from, you can say, exactly which email address on your account you want it to come from. I'm going to say this is from Zapier bot. You could change the from name to whoever you want. For subject line, I'll say your Google Drive folder. And we'll say Hi, Todd Harper. If you wanted to just say the person's first name and you only have their first and last, watch my first webinar where I talked about how you can split and manipulate text. So we could just pull their first name from this. But I'll say here is a link to your Google Drive. And then in Create Folder, we're going to choose that same, it wasn't self-link, it is alternate link right there. Bam. And then we can just send that test. And now if I go to my email, let me pull that over in just a moment. There we go. Hi, Todd Harper. Here's a link to your Google Drive. Bam, they're in. The one thing I didn't do here that is actually necessary for Google specifically is when you create a new folder from Zapier, it is by default, it is private. So you need to add sharing permissions. If you do another Google Drive step, you can say add file sharing preference. And for file ID, you're gonna choose custom, and you're gonna choose the ID from the previous action, that one, and say sharing preference, and then you should choose anyone with the internet who has the link, can view and comment, can edit. You can choose which one you want. I'll say can edit, continue, and we can test that step. And you can see now if I go here and click on sharing, it says anyone with this link can edit because we just told it to. So there you go. I just built that Zap for you. Who was that? I'd be happy to kind of send you this formula if I can connect with you afterward.
I'm happy to go back through and remember who posted that.
Sure,
I know
sure.
I kind of threw those into the presenter there, but I can always email their email to you after the chat. We'll get that.
Perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, and so whoever that was, I'll email you a copy of that Zap so you can have it for your own. Cool.
Jay. Yeah. Fantastic. Todd, thank you so much for your patience and for building all that out. I know that our viewers here were actually really excited, as people were very, very excited to see you just go ahead and build it out and see how easy it is to do. But before we hop off, I know there weren't too many questions today. I know there was a lot of just like learning and seeing how we're doing this. But before we hop off, are there any other questions that Todd can answer here today? If not, totally okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't neglecting to offer that to our viewers here. But we had a really nice webinar. I appreciate everyone for being here. Give everyone just a second to think it's any other questions. But
and I will say, I'm popping something up on the screen right now. That is, let's see, there we go. You should see something about an event called Zap Connect. This is Zapier's annual conference that they host for their members. It's free to attend, and it says buy now. There's nothing to buy. Sorry, I forgot to change the text. But you can register for Zap Connect. That's in a couple weeks, and it's a full day learning opportunity to get hands-on with Zapier and start implementing some Zaps for yourself. So I'm going to take that down in 3, 2, 1. All right.
Fantastic. That's awesome. Thank you, Todd. Jay was asking when Zapier and Dubsado 103 is happening. So you know what? We're running back again. Okay. I think I love it. As long as Todd's down, we'll be happy to host it for everyone here. If you all still want some more Zapier information, if you have,
I promise.
Zaps. Sorry.
Oh, I promise. If there's a 103, the next one will be less technical. I wanted to challenge you in this one, but we can go back to some basics in the next one.
No worries. No, we really appreciate it, Todd. If you are looking to get a hold of Todd, you can obviously search Business Tech BFF on the web. His website should come up. You can also find him on our Dubsado Certified Specialist directory if you're interested in hiring Todd. He's fantastic for building out Zaps. And with that, I think we're about done here. Todd, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Here has a really great rest of your day. Okay. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.